Welcome back to the Eerie Mysteries, a channel dedicated to telling creepy and mysterious stories from the subreddit nosleep. If you enjoy this content, please give us a like and subscribe to help us grow even more. And now, let's dive into the story. I never thought it was weird. It was the same as Dad going to work every day and Mom cooking dinner every night. Just, Maddie always ate upstairs. Mom made sure everyone at the table had a full serving before she got to work on Maddie's plate. She would load it with supersized portions of whatever was for dinner, plus leftovers from last night. By the time it was ready, the mountain of food would put Dad's appetite to shame. The night after my 8th birthday, Mom's arms shook carrying Maddie's dinner. She teetered across the kitchen with a serving plate, the one we use for appetizers when we have guests. 3 hamburgers, 2 chicken breasts, egg salad, at least a half dozen corn dogs, and a pile of potatoes. Squeezed next to that were pork chops, meatballs, shrimp fried rice in a Tupperware, and a full mixing bowl of mac and cheese. "Do you need help, honey?" Mom shook her head, finding her balance on the stairs. "Oh no, Mama's got it. Maddie's not feeling well today." "Don't stuff him now." I turned to Dad. Frankly, I was in a bad mood. Maddie hadn't wished me a happy birthday yet. In fact, he hadn't come out of his room all day yesterday. He was 2 years older than me, and our sibling rivalry ran deep. Why does Maddie need that much food? What if I'm still hungry? Why doesn't he just come down and eat it here? He's a growing boy, you know. Puberty's hitting him. That's a time when every kid undergoes remarkable changes. You'll see. He ignored my other question, so I asked again. Dad put his fork down. "Your brother is self-conscious. I know, we've told him it's silly, but we're respecting his decision, giving him time. And you should too. He's your big brother, but he doesn't have one. What he's going through can be scary." I crossed my arms. "Sounds like a big baby." "Enough." His voice cut through me. He spoke through his teeth. "Apologize," I mumbled under my breath. "Excuse me? I'm sorry." Dad nodded. Mom came down a minute later and we finished our dinner in silence. In bed, I began to plot a nasty trick. The next day after the bus dropped me off, Mom told me she was going for groceries and to stay in the house in case Maddie needed anything. I went up to his room and knocked on the door. "Maddie?" There was no response. "Some of my friends from school are coming over today. Do you want to play with us?" Again, nothing. I made a face and started down the steps. He wasn't making this easy. Halfway down the stairs, there was a sound from behind his door. "Maddie?" Something dragged a short distance before stopping. I held my breath, straining to hear more. A few seconds passed before I hopped the rest of the way down, confused but eager for my friends to arrive. Mom was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Hunter and Cody got dropped off. They popped out of an SUV. Hunter's mom drove and waved, running towards the house. We played for a little in the yard while I explained my plan. Cody looked like he couldn't wait. "That doesn't sound nice," Hunter mumbled. "Maddie's never nice to me. Remember my birthday party? He didn't even go on the bouncy house," Cody piped up. "Yeah, we're not gonna hurt him, Hunter." A few more minutes was all it took to convince him. Then, dinner was ready. Mom tiptoed around the table, dispensing slices of brisket and spoonfuls of pasta with gravy and Italian bread. Cody and Hunter dug in immediately, in a few seconds vaporizing half their plate. I made sure to eat fast too, but kept an eye on Mom. She always put a lot of care into Maddie's plate. After she was finished, up she went. When she returned to the kitchen, there was nothing on our plates. "Wow, you boys are hungry." "Not anymore," I said, patting my stomach. "Careful," Dad laughed. "If you eat like that, you'll get sick." Oof. I crossed my arms and scooted off my chair. "Come on, guys, let's play in my room." "All right, just don't bother Maddie while he's eating." We hid our smiles. We made sure our footsteps could be heard from downstairs, walking into my room and loudly closed the door. Then, tiptoeing, we crept out of my room, down the hallway, until we were in front of Maddie's door. "I'm still hungry," Cody giggled through his hands. "Shh." I knocked quietly. "Hello, Maddie?" Silence. "Can I come in?" Hunter began pointing insistently back towards my room. I waved him off. "Maddie, it's just me. My friends left." 10 seconds trudged by. Cody looked disappointed. Something hot began to well up in my chest. It wasn't anger? Maybe jealousy? I put my hand on the doorknob. I got A's in all my classes, and Mom and Dad would pat me on the head before mentioning how Maddie used to get A+. Every day at school, the teachers always asked, "How's Maddie doing?" I was the one who loved our dog, Archie, the one we had to give away because he never stopped barking at Maddie's door. He doesn't play sports, he doesn't have any friends, he doesn't even go to school. He never comes out of his room. He was a good-for-nothing older brother. No, it was hate. I hated Maddie. I pushed the door open. Immediately, a vile smell hit our nose, causing Hunter to gag. The curtains were drawn tight around the windows, casting a gloom over the mess inside. Broken toys, shredded notebooks, overturned chairs, and even some broken glass. A cooking program for children played on a small TV, its volume just loud enough to hear over a rickety desk fan. Who's ready to welcome our guests for this episode? The fan could only do so much, though. Remains of food stained everything in the room. You couldn't step anywhere to avoid the mold covering the floor. Bits of meat clung to the screen of the television, red sauce smeared the wall, and there was a large stain on the sheets of the bed. Hunter tapped my shoulder. "This is gross. I want to go back." "Your brother is nasty," Cody proclaimed. He stepped meticulously into the room, leaving Hunter and I by the door, using the toys like he would stones to cross a river. He jumped onto the bed and recoiled. "Ooh, it's wet." "We should leave," Hunter begged. "And what's your name, sweetie?" The TV whispered. I searched the room with my eyes. It was my first time inside in years. I remember when me and Maddie used to be inseparable. I may have hated him, but it had been so long since I'd seen him. "I'm Emily." Cody bounced on a dry part of the bed, laughing. "So where's the good food?" "Hold on," I said. "Maddie?" "Why, Emily? You look good enough to eat." It was just unfortunate when Maddie's accident happened. When I thought about it, I don't think I've actually seen him since that field trip. Mom and Dad would show me recent pictures and videos of him, but I can't tell if he looks older or not. It was partly my fault. I was distracted with all the gifts Mom and Dad got me afterward. They treated me with some of the money they got from the stem cell lab in court. Maddie's accident was all their fault, Mom and Dad said. Something shifted from the far side of the room. Cody's face lost its color. "Cody, let's go." When his feet hit the ground, a pale hand darted from beneath the bed. Cody tumbled to the floor, shrieking. "Help!" Cody squealed. There was a clattering from the kitchen and footsteps hurrying up the stairs. Hunter ran out of the room, wailing. I was glued in place by a morbid fixation. The hand that was clamped tightly around Cody's ankle, was that Maddie's? That thing, impossibly tall, clambering out from underneath the bed. That couldn't be my 10-year-old brother, right? I felt my dad's arms scoop me up and rush me into the hall. Before he shut the door, I could see Mom with her arms raised in front of a monster. It was holding Cody upside down. Its swollen belly dragged along the floor, as if it swallowed a boulder. I blacked out. The reason I'm writing this is because I didn't remember Maddie until a few days ago. I'm in my 30s. For the past month, my wife has encouraged me to go to a specialist due to night terrors that began last year. They had started infrequent, but recently, it's been every other night that my cries disturb our sleep. I met with a woman who put me under some sort of hypnosis to help remember trauma. I woke up with those terrible memories. She told me the event could have been rejected from my memory naturally due to the severity of it. Or another specialist had induced amnesia on me. I had even forgot about Hunter and Cody. I looked for them both on social media and was able to get in contact with Hunter. He wasn't very receptive at first, but he agreed to meet after hearing my situation. We sat at a bar. He gulped down his liquor before speaking. My memory is a bit funky too. I was in a mental hospital for a couple months. We moved and I learned how to push it away. The memory. In college, I found out it was labeled a kidnapping. What do you mean? Cody never made it out of the house. That I remember. Your parents did a damn good job. I don't know what hoops they jumped through or whose pockets they filled. He paid for his tab. Don't contact me again. On the way back to my car, I tried calling my mom. She hasn't answered her phone all day. My dad passed away last year, but my mom still lives at my childhood home. I need to talk with her, in person. And maybe I'll burn that house down on my way out. Sometimes trying to remember is like picking a scab. You pry at the callous bits, twisting, peeling until it ruptures, and all the nasty spills out. Before long, an even harder shell forms over the wound. It's just like that when I remember my brother Matty. Like one big gaping scab leaking nauseating glimpses of the past. I tried to focus on the dark pavement that ran like a treadmill under my car. Mom's house was close. There was an image in my mind, a row of worn leather seats, the tinted window of a school bus. We were stopped in front of an enormous building, and the driver was waving us off. There was someone else on the bus with me. I stepped outside and waited for the mechanical lift to lower. The rest of our class had arrived before us, buzzing around the entrance. The mechanical lift shuddered to a halt. I turned, and there was Matty, snug in his wheelchair, a fuzzy blue blanket draped across his legs. He hated riding that bus alone. It was a stubby thing, but the only vehicle at our school with accommodations for Matty. Our teacher, Mrs. Gavin, allowed me to ride with him, and together that short bus became a limousine. Matty and I brought up the rear as the field trip's teeming mass of children funneled into the building. We were accompanied by Miss Rhea. She was a resource teacher, always next to Matty and keeping him company and making him laugh. She was very young, probably freshly graduated, and very pretty. Matty and I loved her. "Miss Rhea, what is this place?" I asked. "This is where scientists work," Miss Rhea said. "They do experiments here and invent things to help people all over the world." She looked down at Matty and squeezed his hand. "Come on." The class oohed and ahed at the things they saw. Their squeals rebounded off the curved walls to create an echo chamber of wonder and amazement. "Look," Miss Rhea pointed. The area we entered had all sorts of infographics. Diagrams showing the steps of cellular mitosis in the human body, the stages of decomposition taking place in a small fox, a series of photos depicting a middle-aged amputee whose missing limb seems to grow from a pathetic stump to a small nub of flesh to eventually a glistening raw baby arm. Isn't that amazing? Miss Rhea shook her head. She grasped a crucifix hanging from her neck. They're miracles, you know. Some of these displays made my stomach do somersaults, and I looked towards my brother. His eyes shone with burgeoning curiosity. At the front of the river of kids, a squat woman in a lined suit was speaking with Mrs. Gavin. Mrs. Gavin waved over Miss Rhea. While they spoke, I turned to Matty. "This is cool, right?" Matty nodded, shifted in his chair. His fuzzy blanket drooped from his knees, but he was fixated elsewhere. "Do you believe in miracles?" he asked softly. I adjusted the blanket to cover his shriveled legs. I followed his aqua blue eyes to the timeline photos of the amputee. The magically regrown arm was shaded a disgusting red and had strange blisters on its skin. Maybe. Miss Rhea appeared next to us wearing one of her beautiful smiles. "Matty, I've got a surprise for you," she beamed at him. "Do you want to see something cool?" He thought for a second. "As long as my brother can come with." The three of us followed the squat woman in the lined suit. We listened to her heels click against the cold floor, making our way through a labyrinth of hallways and doors. We avoided stairs, taking an elevator that descended a few floors before stopping. Soon, we had arrived in front of a door. A window filled the wall next to it, where we could satisfy our hungry eyes. Inside, a laboratory, 3 long tables with an assortment of tall glass tubes, microscopes, and other equipment. In the corner, a fume hood, refrigerator, IV stands, and blood pressure cuffs. In the back were 4 large plastic panels from floor to ceiling, creating a transparent cell with a chair in the middle. There were 4 men in oversized white coats, one of them with a familiar face walking towards the door. It clicked and opened. "Dad?" He smiled and bent over to hug Matty and then me. "Hey kiddos, want to see what Dad's working on?" Yes, Matty and both chimed in. Dad smiled. He told the squat woman in the suit thanks. She nodded and left. I'm sorry, he turned to Miss Rhea. With the boys now, this room exceeds its recommended capacity. Is it all right if I ask you to wait outside? Miss Rhea hesitated. Don't worry, Dad soothed her. Nothing in the lab can harm them so long as my colleagues and I are present. Of course, Doctor. Then we were moving, under the stinging fluorescent lights of the lab, past the black-top tables with their arsenal of tools, towards the back where the plastic cells stood. As we approached, the three scientists searched Maddie with greedy eyes. Maddie, do you remember what we talked about? Last week before bed. Maddie remembered and nodded. I turned around and saw Miss Rhea watching from behind the window. She gave a reassuring wave. These are my friends, Maddie. We've been working for a long, long time. Dad flipped a lever on the plastic cell. One of the walls slid open. Now I can promise you today, you'll walk out of this building all by yourself, on your own 2 feet. The wheelchair shook. Really? Maddie asked. He looked down at his useless limbs. I will walk. You promise? Soon, buddy. Promise? I will walk, he repeated it, a statement this time, carefully studying each word as it came out of his mouth. How? I asked. Dad motioned into the cell. An invitation. The chair meant to hold him was equipped with restraints. Will it hurt? No, I promise. You're not going to feel anything. Dad's coworkers avoided eye contact. Maddie gripped my hand. Ken? No, Maddie, Dad said, beginning to sound impatient. He came close, lowered himself to eye level with us. Son, you are more important to me than anything. It kills me when I see you looking at the kids on the park. Don't you see? My heart aches when the soccer ball bounces to you on the sidelines. I will make sure nothing bad happens to you. I'm trying to make you whole again. Do you want the same thing, Maddie? Do you trust me? Maddie hugged Dad with tears in his eyes. He took his hand and allowed the scientist to roll him into the cell. He trembled as they removed his blanket, scooped him up, and gently set him down again. Then the restraints. The final strap went tight across his forehead. A rapping sound came from behind me. Miss Rhea knocking on the glass, her lips making shapes with no sounds. Dad? Maddie looked uncomfortable. It's okay. He looked at one of his colleagues and nodded towards me. Take him with you. The disappointed scientist grabbed my hand and led me out. Miss Rhea pulled me away as soon as we were through the door. What are you doing to him? She tried to slip past into the lab, but the scientist pushed her back and shut the door. Get off, Miss Rhea shouted. Stop, the man in the lab coat said. He held his hands up, more interested in getting a view from the window. He asked his father to do it. He wants to see what it feels like strapped in. From here, we could only watch as Dad began to work faster. He and his remaining colleagues rushed to put on gloves, masks, and gowns before Dad hurried to a far corner. What is that? Miss Rhea questioned. One of the colleagues in the room had grabbed a syringe filled with black fluid from the table. Hey, Miss Rhea grabbed the shoulder of the scientist. He sputtered, pulling away. I said stop. He snapped his attention back to the lab. Finally, we get to see our results. You will see too. Marching back to Maddie was Dad, gripping an odd shaft of wood in his hands. He hefted it onto his shoulder. Oh my God, Miss Rhea's eyes widened. An axe, 3 feet long and with a steel head. Glistening and winking with each step, it glittered brand new in the sterile light. When Dad re-entered the cell, the color drained from Maddie's face. Maddie? Miss Rhea was running down the hall. Shit. The scientist next to me banged on the window and took off after her. Dad must have known, because the next thing he did was raise the axe over his head. Maddie thrashed against his restraints, splayed his fingers out to reach for something, anything. His ankles were wrestled, and his legs pulled taut beneath the blade. Someone jammed the syringe of black liquid into his thigh. In those few seconds, the only thing more chilling than the horror on Maddie's face was the look on Dad's. He was looking directly into my brother's eyes, smiling like it was Christmas morning. The axe flashed. I had to swerve to avoid smashing into a mailbox. I slammed on the brakes. When I saw the address in the rear view, I realized I was stopped in front of my childhood home. It was the early morning, earlier than the sun, and the lonely street had no lamps to illuminate it. My old house hid in the dark, shifting restlessly. I didn't want to. Maybe if I hadn't had those drinks before making the drive, I wouldn't have even put the car in park, just taken my foot off the brake and caught the sunrise on the journey back. The wooden porch moaned as I ascended and knocked on the door. I wasn't expecting her to answer. She hadn't returned any of the 12 calls I made within the last couple hours, but to my surprise, she did. Little more than half my height, she wrapped her frail arms around my waist and squeezed with unexpected strength. She told me what a surprise it was, but a wonderful one, and what brought me out to see my mother after so many years. I couldn't bear to look at her. I peeled her off me and brushed past into the house. We stood in the living room. My mother attacked at the cuticles on her fingers. She had white, wispy hair that seemed to float around her head. "Oh, honey, I'm so glad to see you again, but it's a bad time." I cut her off with my hand. "You need to tell me everything." The air had gotten deathly quiet. Mom was vigorously fidgeting with herself. "I think you should come back later," she whispered. My head was starting to pound. "Stop," I said, shaking. "Please, just please shut up and sit down." She listened. "What's wrong, honey?" "I don't..." "My brother. What did you do to my brother? What did Dad do to Maddie?" She flinched in her chair, looked toward the basement door. "Maddie? Brother? Are you feeling well?" It felt like someone was smacking a hammer at the inside of my skull. I pulled my phone from my pocket. "Mom, I will give you one chance, or I'm calling the cops." She clasped her hands in front of her. "Oh, don't. Oh, okay. When did you remember?" Even after speaking with Hunter, it had all felt like a lucid nightmare. But this was it. The smoking gun. My brother Maddie was real. What was Dad doing? She took a breath before speaking. He was smart, the smartest person I knew, and if he had a little more time, he could have fixed him. "Maddie didn't need to be fixed," she snapped. "Oh, you would understand, with your perfectly healthy children. Is that a crime? That we wanted our son to be whole? You know it's what Maddie wanted. He was a kid, you bastard. You never gave him a choice, not a real one." I sagged onto the couch, grabbing the sides of my head, the pain unbearable. Mom was crying, wailing, begging. Through the tears she trembled. I sacrificed so much for him. Liar. The money didn't last forever, and when your father died it was just me and well, I didn't know what to do. Her shoulders were heaving. I hated seeing him in pain. My little Maddie, those terrible things I did to those boys, I'd do it again if... The words brought a chill to my skin. What? He was so hungry, it was impossible. I did it because I love him. I love my baby. Mom? A noise cut us off. A moan from behind the basement door. I stumbled over and flung the door wide. Immediately that smell, from so many years ago, the one I recognized but could never identify. The smell of Maddie's room. I looked at my mother in shock. "What have you done?" Down the steps, 2, 3 at a time until my foot caught on something that almost sent me tumbling face first. The light switch was there at the bottom landing, and I flipped it just as I noticed the wetness covering my foot. The sole bulb in the center of the room flickered. I had tripped over a head, decomposing and dead some time ago. It was crushed now and leaking foul liquid. My shoe print was embedded in its hair. I had no time to retch as my eyes, not daring to but forced by morbid curiosity, laid upon the rest of the room. There were only 2 things in that basement that I could make sense of: bones and clothes. The rest was a putrid mixture resembling chunky velvet tar. The clothes floated in this tar, permanently stained and bloated by the rotted lake covering the floor. And the bones, too many to count. Femurs, ribs, skulls, vertebrae protruded from the ground, some floating too, decomposed to the point where they were hollow and light. Only then did I purge my stomach. The splatter of vomit masked the noise of something moving. From the tar, an appendage slithered onto the landing. The pale tentacle curled and folded over onto itself, gaining traction like a desert snake over sand. I pushed myself against the wall to avoid it, but it had no interest in me. It coiled around the crushed head and dragged it beneath the muck. I could trace its movement beneath the surface. Bones were knocked loose or pulled along as it headed towards the far end of the basement, back where the light could not reach. There, another landing rose above the tar. I could see the tentacle pulling itself up onto it. From the dark, another moan. I slipped in my vomit trying to flee. I crawled up the first few steps, steadying myself back to my feet before pushing with everything in my body. My mother stood at the top and I careened past her, pushing her out of the way. "Honey, don't tell anyone, please. You understand, right?" He was still growing. The garage. Bursting through the door, I scrambled, searching through the boxes and junk, tossing them out of the way as I went. There was bawling from the living room. I couldn't just let him starve. By the time your father died, we were broke. I couldn't even pay for a funeral, but he would have wanted it. Yes, he wouldn't have wanted his baby to starve. A ringing shrieked in my ears. I found the canister, unscrewed the cap, and stormed the house, leaving a glistening trail behind me. I started in the kitchen. I poured the gas over the table where me and my family used to eat our meals. "What are you doing?" In the living room, I covered the couch and the TV where Maddie and I used to watch cartoons. I opened the door to the basement and shook more onto the stairs. The tar sloshed in a frenzy below. I threw the canister down, a quarter full, and made for the front door, fumbling in my pocket. "Mom, we're leaving." I grasped my Zippo lighter. She stood at the back of the living room, tears and snot hanging from her face. She shook her head. I yelled at her, screamed, "This place will burn." But still, she remained. The basement door rattled. Pudgy tentacles were wrapping themselves around the door frame and pulling, hoisting something up the stairs. One more time. I looked at my mother with tears spilling from my eyes. "Mom, please." She looked towards the basement and covered her face in her hands. Her voice was thin and weak. "I can't." I choked a sob. I opened the Zippo and flicked its flame to life. "Michael." In the basement doorway, the tentacles had pulled a deformed mound of flesh into view. Like the tentacles, it was pale, and I could tell it was only a small part of the whole body. Its skin pulsed and stretched, but near the apex of it were eyes. A set of moist blue eyes, and even on something so horrible, they looked full of despair. "Michael," it said again. "Maddie," I said, "I'm sorry." I dropped the Zippo and ran. The fire caught fast and burned hot. I sat and watched from the car for only a few seconds. I was still able to catch the sunrise on the way home, though I couldn't bear to look at it. The glow it cast was the same hue as the flames that licked the siding of my childhood home. There isn't much else to say. The bad memories have come, and they are here to stay. But the good ones have started to ebb in, slowly, like a morphine drip dispensing bite-sized portions of heaven. I remember our bus rides together. I remember his cheers at the rec league soccer games I played in, and how he used to help me with my homework. My brother Maddie was the best brother I could have asked for.